There's a moment when the sun disappears, when darkness falls and you're left with just your fears. That's the moment you feel your first pang of doubt. That's the moment when the night comes out. When the Night Comes Out presents 1/10 of a second. How long does it take for a bullet to travel from the end of a gun into a person? Our protagonist in this tale guesses maybe 1/10 of a second. Not a lot of time, but what can go through your mind in such a short span of time? Often, the greatest horrors are those man inflicts upon others, or that come from within someone who seems to exude evil, or from what we can inflict upon ourselves within our own minds. This seems especially true when the night comes out. It's funny, you know, how time works? Think about it for a minute. Think about how time stretches and shrinks depending on what you're doing. When you're having fun, or with a lover, or with friends, it's never enough time. Even a good movie goes by too fast. Then, when you really want something over with fast, like a trip to the dentist or waiting in line at the DMV, 15 minutes feels like 6 days. How long does it take for a bullet to fire from the barrel of a gun and strike the other person who's maybe 20 feet away? 1/10 of a second, maybe? And yet, even in that short amount of time, so much can happen. In fact, it's during that time you might see more, sense more, hear more, and think about more than any other time in your life. Anyway, as we stand here in that frozen bit of time, you might be wondering just who the hell I am. Well, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Peter Gurdon, known as just Petey by most people I associate with. They say Petey is short for Peter, but they have the same number of letters, so go figure how people's fucking minds work. Granted, this is a pretty normal, not weird nickname, given the people with whom I normally associate. The crews I'm around tend to have names like The Knife and Joey Bats or Stoolie. Maybe some other weird names that may or may not apply to something they said or did. I was Petey, and that was fine with me. I got into this line of work when I was young, as I suppose most people do. You steal a wallet here, break into a house for some extra cash there, and before you know it, you and the guys you hang out with are known as a crew, and you're stealing all sorts of things for a living. Other kids were riding bikes and collecting baseball cards. Me? I learned to pick a lock at the age of 12. I could crack a safe at 15. I was in juvie 3 times by the time I was finally legally an adult.
Order in the court.
And since then have done 2 stints in prison. Mostly I was doing small-time stuff, but my reputation grew. I guess I had a few traits that other criminals liked. I was loyal, didn't question things, and I got the job done. Most of the time, when I did a job, things went well, people got paid, and everyone went home happy. I never killed anyone, although I knew how to handle a gun and had sure threatened plenty of people. I surrounded myself with other guys willing to kill if needed, but I just liked to take things and see how much money I could make. As you can tell by the fact that I am not yet 30 and had not spent all of my life in jail, I had never been pinched for any of my big jobs. I was lucky, and I guess some crews started thinking of me as a lucky charm because I kept getting jobs. For me, it was the planning and the execution of the job that gave me the high. I made a lot of money, sure, and lived well, but it was the thrill of cracking the safe. It was the high of getting away with thousands of dollars worth of stolen property. If you haven't experienced it, it's impossible to explain the thrill. I dreamed of pulling bigger jobs. I think everyone who gets into this kind of work imagines stealing a crown jewel or a hope diamond, maybe some priceless piece of art. Again, it was the challenge of the heist. I mean, you sure as hell couldn't make any money trying to pawn off something that big. We criminals are not so unlike the world's office drones. Many of us dream of moving up the ladder, at least a little bit. You get too big, then the government comes down on us. But if you stay too small, you end up working at a fast food joint and picking pockets the rest of your life. Anyway, where the hell was I? Oh, yeah. I guess things started about 3 months ago. I was sitting in my favorite spot, which was a local cafe just down the street from where I live. I reside in a nice loft apartment overlooking the city from one side and the lake from the other. I spend most of my days there, and when people want to reach out to me, there are ways, but I can usually do business from my couch. These days, however, I make enough cash so most of my days can be spent in that little dark place, eating, drinking, and talking with the guy who owns it, the people who work there, and a few friends. And before you ask, yes, most of my friends are crooks too, but who am I to judge, right? And who the hell are you to judge? So yeah, 3 months ago, I guess it was around noon, and I was sitting in the back talking with Harry, the guy who does the cooking at the joint I liked hanging in during that time of the day. The place was pretty empty, even though it was lunch. It was that special kind of hole in the wall, the kind of place that services a certain clientele. From the outside, it sure didn't look like the place all of the fancy businessmen would want to hang out in before heading off to their board meetings or whatever the drones do in those glass towers. Anyway, there I sit, jawing away to Harry, and the door opens. Harry and I look up, and the noon sun comes streaming into the gloom, and we both have to shade our eyes, blinking at the light. A figure is standing in the doorway, and I immediately notice he's flanked by 2 other guys, one on each side, and each one of them is roughly the size of Mount Everest wearing a suit. The sun was so bright, and I had been sitting there for so long, I could only see a kind of shadow in the doorway. Then, as the door closed behind this guy and his 2 giant compadres, my eyes had to readjust to the gloom, so I still couldn't see who it was. To be honest, if I had been a bigger deal in the criminal world, I would have been worried. This dude had me dead to rights. I couldn't see, and if he had wanted to come in blasting, I would have been splattered all over Harry. Instead, this big voice cut through the dust and gloom. "You Petey Garden?" The voice from the person standing in the middle of the trio. The voice was calm, talkative, friendly, but also commanding. It filled the room. I did not feel too threatened, although I did rest my hand on the gun I had tucked into my pants just under the table. You can never be too careful. Plus, by then, my eyesight was returning. "I could be," I said, still squinting and wishing my eyes would stop showing me strange colored spots and let me see who I was talking to. "Who wants to know?" There was a laugh, and I heard footsteps as the figure walked toward me. "You won't need that gun, Petey. I just want to talk to you." Eventually, the person to whom the voice belonged got closer. I saw it as a man of about 40, maybe 5'7", with dark hair, just starting to turn gray around the temples. He wore a white suit with a black silk shirt and a red silk tie. The suit looked as if it had just come off the hanger that morning. The guy had a white hat on his head, which he took off as he approached, playing with it in his hands. His face was handsome, tanned, with an average nose, although it looked like it might have been broken once or twice. It was his eyes, though, that really caught me. They appeared to be totally black. It was as if there was the white part and then just pupil, with no iris. Get me? Something about this guy made me swallow hard and my heart start beating really fast. Hey, I'm secure enough in my masculinity to say the guy was good-looking. "My name is Kane First, Petey," the man said, and he smiled at me. It felt like all of the blood in my body sank into my shoes. It got cold in there, like they tell you it does when ghosts show up. Staring into his shark-like smile, I seemed to get lost among the many teeth. Those teeth were so white, man. The eyes carried no emotion, none of the mirth the smile attempted to convey. I mean, of course I knew who Kane First was. Every petty thief and crook knew the name. Kane First was the criminal that other criminals either feared or wanted desperately to kill or work with or just to become. Like the guy in that movie with all the crooks in a lineup? Yeah, that character may have been based on Kane First. In case you're not a petty crook, or maybe you hide under a rock, let me tell you about First. The legend says Kane was a true child prodigy of crime. How much of it is truth, nobody knows anymore. Probably not even Kane himself. He is said to have murdered his own parents at the age of 6. Another story says he was orchestrating bank robberies by the age of 10. Surely most of this was crap, probably a lot of it made up by Kane himself. Still, what I could surely bank on was that the man had been in the business for a long time, had become extremely wealthy doing it, had managed to stay out of prison, and was a notorious killer. Nobody crossed or messed with Kane First and lived to tell about it. The man had done every kind of crime there was. Robbery, murder, arson, counterfeiting, one of his favorites, extortion. If he hadn't done it himself, he helped others plan and execute. Needless to say, I was more than a little flattered that he wanted to talk to me. I was shocked he even knew my fucking name. "I apologize, Mr. First," I said, standing up. "I couldn't tell who you were standing in the light like that." Kane laughed as he sat down at my table, crossed his legs, and placed his hat on his knee. His face was alive, smiling, talking. His eyes never left my face, and it seemed like they never blinked. "No worries, Petey," Kane said. "Please, have a seat so we can discuss some business." I sat down. There was a lump in my throat, and I found it hard to swallow. "Just breathe," I told myself. "Keep your cool." "I've been hearing good things about you, Petey," Kane said. "I've been hearing them for quite some time now." "You've heard things about me?" I asked, incredulous. "You've been keeping tabs on me?" Kane nodded. "I keep tabs on a lot of people, especially up-and-coming talent like you, Petey. You have a knack. More importantly, you seem to have an incredible amount of luck, and, as you know, in our business, that can mean a hell of a lot more than talent." Kane paused to order himself a drink and a sandwich from Harry. "I have a job I would like you to be a part of, Petey." He sneaked a quick look at his watch. "It's a simple job. A gentleman has a certain amount of jewelry that I want. The man keeps this jewelry at his home. This man has a wife and 2 teenage daughters. He also has a very expensive security system and a safe. I want you to see if you can crack it, and if you can't, then we are going to find a way to persuade the gentleman to open it." He spoke fast. It was like hearing a machine gun talking. After the barrage, he paused, studied me with his strange dark eyes. I felt like a bug under a magnifying glass. "As I said, it should be a very simple job." He thanked Harry for the drink and sandwich once it was set down. "However, this job will pay you a cool $5 million once I have fenced the jewelry. I'll pay you $500,000 upon your acceptance of this job, and the rest of the money comes after." He took a very large bite of his sandwich. The sound of the lettuce crunched between his teeth, and it was absurdly loud in the quiet cafe. My brain was spinning. I could not believe that Kane First was sitting right in front of me. I also couldn't believe he was asking me to do a job. Me, Petey, part of a Kane First crew. Beyond that, I was having a really hard time believing the numbers he was throwing at me. I mean, what else could I say, but when do we start? I think I've told you about 6 times. That was 3 months ago. Seems like a long time, but it's almost nothing when you're planning a heist. I woke up the next morning and found I had $500,000 more in my bank account than I had the night before. This disturbed me as well as delighted me, as I had not given Kane my account information. Kane must have set about rounding up the rest of the team. He called me to get things started, so I began casing the man we were going to rob. So let me tell you about this guy we're going to rob. He was some major league jewelry dealer who owned a very exclusive and very expensive store downtown. The kind of jewelry store you only went into when you had an appointment. Apparently, from time to time, he would watch over jewelry and jewels for people in his own personal safe for a rather substantial fee. As you may have already guessed, his safe and his security system at home was rather well respected, so the jewelry would accompany him home for safekeeping. I cased the house several times, watching the comings and goings of the servants and his family. His wife was beautiful, and so were his daughters. One of them was 16 and the other 14, and all of them wore an obscene amount of jewelry. I couldn't quite figure out what this guy was supposed to be holding in his safe the night Kane wanted to do the job, but that didn't really bother me because Kane knew, and that was all that mattered. As for the guy's house, well, it was enormous. It took a lot of bribing to find someone to get me information about what the place looked like inside. In fact, Kane had to call in a favor to get actual photos of the interior. It took me about 10 seconds to realize the wall safe in this house was the most advanced and complicated I had ever seen. I confided this to Kane, and he simply patted me on the back and told me he had every confidence in the world I would be able to handle it. I spent time studying the safe. I pored over manuals and schematics. I also started to practice. However, the more I did, the more fearful I became. At the same time, you must understand, you do not disappoint Kane First. Doing so, trying to back out of a job once he hired you, was a really good way to end up in a landfill or buried beneath a construction project under a few dozen feet of concrete. We'd get the guy to open it, I told myself. If I couldn't find a way to do it, then we'd get the guy to do it. No one would put their family in jeopardy over some diamonds, would they? The time ticked away, far too fast, but I got to know the other people on this job. There was Lenny, Joe, Stevie, Mark, and Don. They didn't give me any of their nicknames, although I am certain all of them had them. We knew each other only by our first names, and it seemed to me most of the other guys were there simply because they were big and scary looking. They would make sure the family stayed put while I got into the safe. Kane also had some other people working behind the scenes in a technical capacity, but I was never privy to their names or even allowed to meet them. This was a slick operation. The reputation First had earned showed off right there in everything we were doing. Still, the fears about the safe nagged me. All too soon, the night arrived. To start things off, Kane and his friends cut off the power to the entire block upon which the mansion sat. Dressed as power company employees, we arrived at the mansion, having already intercepted the call the man had made to the power company, then to the police. Apparently, Kane knew this was standard procedure for this guy due to the sensitive nature of the valuables he held in his safe. The crew, including myself, knocked on the door and the maid answered. Lenny maced her, then hit her over the head with a small lead pipe he had hidden in a toolbox. We were inside in seconds, removing our guns from the toolboxes we carried. I had a pump shotgun with the stock sawed off, while the rest of the crew had very large, mean-looking automatics. I never cared much for guns, even though I had used them and had become a pretty good shot. I preferred to just steal things, not shoot my way out of places. In short, I was hardly a gun expert, so what kinds of pistols the crew carried, I had no clue. I just knew it felt as if the gun I was carrying might blow me backwards through the wall if I shot the damn thing. We found the husband and wife in bed, the man reading while the woman watched TV. There was some shouting and noise before the sight of the gun shut everyone up. In just a few minutes, the man was duct taped to a chair and his wife duct taped to the bed. Then they were both gagged too. I set about locating the safe, pushing the sounds I heard of the growing chaos out of my head. I heard noises from the teenage daughter's rooms. It barely registered as I switched into all business mode. Once I found the safe, everything else faded into nothingness. I turned on the light in the darkened office and took one look at the monstrosity before me and knew right then that my streak of luck had just run out. Somewhere along the way, the man of the house had upgraded the safe from the one I had been studying to a newer model. This one was even more impenetrable. I felt fear in my gut. How was I going to get out of this one? I tried it anyway. I gave it everything I knew as fast as I could. I do not know on what planet this safe had been made, but it didn't appear to be planet Earth. After half an hour, twice as long as the plan called for, I emerged from the office sweating and exhausted. I had to tell Kane I could not get the safe opened. "You what?" he asked calmly, his gun still pointed at the head of the man of the house, who wept and whimpered in his chair. "You just go back and try it again, Petey." "I can't," I said. "I've tried everything I know at least twice. This safe is like nothing I've ever seen." The face that had looked at me so pleasantly for so long suddenly changed before my eyes. I can only explain that somehow his eyes managed to turn colder and his mouth pulled back in a snarl. I swear I heard a deep growl from within his chest. He looked ready to hit me with his gun. "Then try it a third time," he yelled. He whirled around and grabbed me by the collar. "I hired you to do a job," he said, spitting into my face. "Now you go do it before people start getting hurt." So I went back to the office and tried everything again. I tried things in combination. I tried doing things backwards. Every moment that ticked by, I felt the string holding my life together unravel. After another half an hour, I trudged back. Kane was sweating now, and his smile was long gone. I could see Lenny and Stevie shifting nervously in the room at the foot of the bed. "Where are my diamonds, Petey?" Kane said. "It does not appear to me as if you have them." "The safe is not budging," I said. "Not without a nuclear device. Maybe we can just get a combination out of this guy." Kane roared, making an inhuman sound. There were no words, just an exclamation of frustration and anger. He turned on me again. I shrank back, as I was sure the pistol would come down on my head and then he'd stomp me to death. Then he seemed to catch himself in mid-action, paused, and turned on the man taped to the chair. "How do we get into the safe?" Kane said. The man shook his head, his eyes pleading. "You don't seem to understand something," Kane said. "Either you tell us how to get into the safe, or you're gonna watch your family tortured and murdered right in front of you." The man's eyes grew wider, and he began to scream behind the tape around his mouth. Kane reached out and ripped the tape off. The sound of that tape was so loud it made me wince. I can't," the man pleaded. Cain sighed as if this was just the most wearisome thing that could have happened. He turned and looked at Lenny and Stevie. "Guys," he said, "you know what to do." The things they did to that man's wife were enough to chill me to my very core. I had never seen human beings behave that way to another human being. The man in the chair screamed, cried, and begged. Cain kept asking him for access to the safe. The man explained that he did not have the combination, but the security company which had installed the safe always dropped off the expensive stuff, locked it, then came in the morning to unlock the safe and take the stuff away. He never used the combination or opened the safe, and half the time he never knew what was even being stored there. "I don't believe you!" Cain roared. Cain had turned into the monster I had always heard he was. His eyes blazed from within their dark core. He screamed, his face a dark red. His entire body quivered with barely contained rage. He pistol-whipped the man, then, as the poor guy bled all over his lap, turned and shot the man's wife. It was so sudden that I nearly felt my bladder let go. "Get the youngest daughter," Cain said. "No!" the man screamed. "Please, I can't open it. Please don't hurt my children." Cain snarled. "I don't want to, but I need what's in your safe, so you better think of something. Fast." I heard the girl scream from down the hall. My heart hammered in my chest. I felt as if my hair were sweating. My entire body felt slick with sweat. I had never killed anyone before, but I felt the sudden urge to kill Cain. Getting your hands on some diamonds was one thing, but killing kids was something else. I felt something inside my head switch. This was all my fault. Had I had the guts to tell Cain in the first place I wasn't going to be able to crack the safe, this might have been averted. Sure, I had robbed people right to their face, but this was something new. The thrill was cracking the safe, stealing without being seen. This was something else entirely. Was I really going to stand here and watch as Cain slaughtered the entire family? I had never had an altruistic bone in my body until that very moment. "Cain," I said, "we need to get out of here. The power is going to be back on soon, and—" Cain pointed the gun at my head. "You shut up! This is all because of you!" The guys led the girl into the room. She wore just her nightgown and was barefoot. Her mouth was taped, her hands bound behind her. The poor girl's eyes were wide and frightened beyond words. The thing about it was that she looked so very young. As Mark and Joe threw her down into the middle of the room, I felt the final penny drop into place inside my brain. Whatever change had started a moment ago finished in that instant. I was mad, furious. This was not how things should be done. This had gone too far, and the longer we stayed, the higher risk of being caught. I gripped my shotgun tighter and brought it up slowly. "Now," Cain said, turning to the man again, "we are going to start over with your daughter here. Tell me how to get into the safe, and I can make all of this go away. Otherwise, you can watch us torture her and then splatter her brains next to her mother's." I moved slowly to the center of the room, walking towards Joe, who was standing on one side of the girl. I tried so hard to move without being seen. No rushing, despite the fact time was obviously running out. "I don't know," the man said through broken teeth and swollen lips. He wept hysterically, barely able to form words. "I swear to you, there is no way I can open the safe. Please don't hurt her." "You don't even comprehend how badly I can hurt you yet," Cain whispered. I racked the slide of my shotgun, sliding a shell into the chamber. The sound was very loud. Cain turned. "What?" he said. I lifted the gun, and it felt as if I were moving in slow motion. I fired nearly point blank into the side of Joe's head. Joe never had a chance to turn around. His head vanished in a spray of blood and bone. I racked another shell into place. Mark had been watching Kane and not me. He might as well have been standing still for how slow he reacted. Joe's body was still falling. I fired into Mark's chest, noting the look of surprise on his face as he stumbled backwards, tripped over his own feet, and fell. I heard Joe's body hit the floor as I spun around to face Stevie, who had entered the room behind me. In a flash, I sent Stevie spinning with a shot to his shoulder. I heard Mark's body hit the floor, dimly registered Stevie's screams, but turned to face Kane. You may ask, and you'd be right to do so, why didn't I start with Kane? I wish I could give you an answer. I really wish I could tell you why. In the moment all of this happened, it felt as if I had to stop the guys holding the girl. Was it stupid? Yeah, but you have to remember, I knew my luck had run out. That may not mean much to you, but it meant everything to me. Whatever I did, it was always going to end this way. Kane's gun was already out, and he stared at me with those snake-like eyes. They bored through my skull. I'm so disappointed in you, Petey, he said, and pulled the trigger. 1/10 of a second for a bullet to cross the space between the man firing the gun and the man about to take the bullet in the face. It does not seem like a lot of time. Maybe enough time to take a breath. Maybe enough time to try and duck, hoping the bullet just grazes instead of blowing the part of what makes you think out the back of your head. Maybe it's enough time to have your entire life flash right before your eyes, so fast you can barely see it or distinguish one moment from the next. Maybe it's just enough time to remember and realize how your whole life had led up to this moment, and just how you had managed to get into this situation. Maybe... Kane watched Petey's body fall to the floor, the red circle of the bullet hole in the middle of his forehead staring at him like a third eye. He felt rage, the likes of which he had seldom felt before. He heard Stevie screaming as he slid down the wall, leaving bloody smears everywhere. Kane raised his gun again and shut off that noise as well. As Lenny entered the room, his gun drawn, Kane spoke to him as calmly as he could. What the hell happened? Lenny breathed. This whole thing is shot to hell, Kane said. We better just mop this up and get the hell out of here. Lenny nodded his affirmation, then headed back down the hall. Kane heard the gunfire not long after. Kane sighed, twisting his neck until it cracked. Sometimes it just didn't pay to get up in the morning. Kane set back to work cleaning up. Poor Petey. A man who spent his entire life dwelling around the fringes of true evil, until true evil knocked on his door. Only then did he realize the horrors humans can do to each other. He found out, too late, that even he had a conscience. Something found in short order, when the night comes out. You've been listening to When the Night Comes Out, a weekly horror anthology podcast with stories by Bryan W. Alaspa and narrated and produced by Allie James. Music by Vivek Abhishek and Kevin MacLeod. For Bryan's work, visit his website at bryanwalaspa.com or visit amazon.com for his works of fiction and nonfiction. For Allie's work, find her on Facebook at Allie James Projects. Check out our website, whenthenightcomesout.com, to learn how to support us on Patreon.